I don't normally do this in English. And although both my guests are German as well, we decided to make an exception as they are internationally relevant. Richard has amassed credits on 6 Grammy-winning albums out of 26 nominations, and Hans Martin has just won a Grammy for his Peter Gabriel Atmos mix. We recorded the video a week before the awards ceremony and didn't even know it. This conversation has 2 parts. Richard and Hans Martin have both worked with Prince, one of the most successful artists of all time. In this video, they talk about that and what it's like to work for top artists. In the other video, we talk about being a mixing engineer and everything that goes with it. The link to the second part is in the video description. But for now, please enjoy this conversation with Richard and Hans Martin. You have both worked with Prince, one of the greatest artists of all time. I know German engineering has a good reputation. Is there also German audio engineering? Did Prince like German engineers? Who worked with him first? Hans Martin, I guess.
I did, yeah. When did you work with him, Richard? You did like 2000...
It's 2008 to 2009, and like basically 2 albums at the same time. They were called Lotus Flower and MPL Sound.
Okay.
And so and actually was released as a triple album with one of his proteges at the time. But that was kind of the length. And I know you did it much longer, actually. And also you did... is it Crystal Ball, right? And New Power Soul and maybe Emancipation, is that right?
I did about a third of Emancipation. I did an album called The Truth, which was then packaged into the Crystal Ball, like you said. The Crystal Ball itself didn't take very long. It was like a 2-week raid the vault, like a couple new mixes, but mainly editing and sequencing and putting it together and then going mastering at Gruntman's. And then I did one called New... I did a lot of albums. I think I counted them, I may be off now, but I think it's 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
including... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and if I wanted to say... Okay, so I'm going to say one thing. I'm like before even meeting the man, I was just like a huge fan. I had like every album, every bootleg. I know he didn't like bootlegs, but I had everything, right? This is like the early 90s, like literally from the Diamonds and Pearls album onwards, I suppose. And so your name and your abbreviation, the HM Buff thing, right? I mean, I think I saw it like first time on the New Power Soul album because that's where I noticed, but because it was that thing that he had like this great way of writing credits, and yours was like something like conceived or something like that. Like, there was something like giving birth to it, and I noticed
circumcised. Bathed and circumcised was my credit, yeah.
And I was like, I was. Go ahead.
And at that point, it was like I got away from the HM Buff, and he did the full name. So the Hans - Martin Buff, and then it was like at the time he wasn't Prince, he was like, So it was like bathed and circumcised by Prince, Hans Martin Buff. That was totally awesome. It was like the best credit because my credit was like the biggest freaking credit just because of my long name. And he was really into that, and then I remember coming up with a credit for the mastering because he didn't like the word mastering. I don't know if that was the same when you were around, but he just had this thing about attaching meaning to words because there was some type of bad vibe about it and jinxing your life when you do it. So mastering sounded very slavery, violent type thing. So I suggested the graduation ceremony performed by Brian Gardner, which he enjoyed very much. Brian, that is. So, yeah, so that was one, and I'm glad you know this album, actually, because it's one of the few that you can't get these days. You can't stream it. It's nowhere out there. Because an NPG, officially New Power Generation album, and not a Prince thing. Yeah, and then I did Rave, and just, a couple came out later. There were, like, collections of outtakes. One called The Slaughterhouse, I think, and one is The Chocolate Something Invasion, I think. That's one as well. And then I did stuff with Chaka Khan, Larry Graham, and a bunch of other things. So it was busy times, as I'm sure it was for you.
Yeah, and that's amazing. To me, that's all amazing because I remember this. Yeah, I remember this credit. I remember it being odd, and so it stuck out. great. I remember your name from that time. We have actually never met, and this actually goes for what I hear. This goes for many Prince engineers that they don't meet each other. I mean, we got to change that, I suppose. But like, anyway, so I noticed that, and actually something happened to me towards the end of when we were getting close to the release of the album. He basically didn't ask me personally, but like through his handler at the time was like, so if I would like to have a nickname for the album credits. And I was like, for a moment, I was like, as a Prince fan, somebody who knows that there's a Michael B and a Sonny T and a Tommy Barbarella and all that stuff and an H.M. Buff, I was like, well, I get where you're coming from. As Richard Furch, I kind of just want my name on the thing. So I actually declined it. I will never know if that was a good idea or not, but I was like, I didn't work this hard to have my name. I mean, it sounded like something he would maybe come up himself. And then what are you going to say? Like, I don't like that? I thought that would be a bad idea, so I said no to that.
Well, mine was, I did that at the time even before Prince, because it was just a handful, and Americans don't get that double name thing with the Hans Martin. That always confused people. Actually, the reason I changed from the HM, I remember, is because I had a friend who was very Buddhist. And she once looked at me and she said, in Buddhism, it's really important that you own your whole name. And I'm not particularly Buddhist, but I thought that was a really interesting thought. Why hide it? So and that's all of a sudden it became what it is and was on New Power Soul. But it's a good thing with the nickname, because I don't know if you remember, but before my time, like on Come, the album Come, and on the Gold Experience and stuff, there's like people like Xanix Bass. They were actual, not nicknames, but pseudonyms of people that had proper names like David Friedlander and stuff. So because he changed his name to, apparently he felt like everybody should hide behind something new. So that's what happened then.
The symbol.
But to answer your question, Timo, I don't know how you feel about this, Richard. Should I say Richard or Richard?
Say Richard. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because
right.
we're in English here.
Yeah. I think it helped. He had some weird, the German kid stood for, a solid approach to work ethic and taking things really, really seriously in terms of detail and not doing half-ass stuff. I do think he had a couple of ideas like that. I think I always thought the German thing helped me. It was a good prejudice that was going on. And, to be fair, I think that's one of the things, I don't know if you'd agree with that, Richard, but like, I learned a hell of a lot of things about myself when I lived in the States. I learned a lot of things that, I would have never said I'm a stereotypical German or, whatever it is. But I certainly found a couple of traits that I thought just everybody did that. And then it just seemed totally off in context. And some I own, some I was like, better lose those. But nonetheless, some of those you just have. And that's a cool thing. I do believe he appreciated that. Was Takumi still around when you were around, Richard?
No,
the guitar tech?
No, he was not. I never met him. I know of him through Morris Hayes, who's the keyboardist / music director. But no, I've never met him.
Takumi is an amazing guy to this day. We see each other every once in a while when he comes to Germany as part of some tour. Last time was Roger Waters. He's just on so many tours. Anyway, but he's Japanese, or of Japanese descent, and I know that helped him as well. He wanted, having a Japanese guitar tech was a cool thing. Which is not the reason he lasted as long as he did. He's just really, 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 really good and a really top-notch dude. But anyway, Timo, it helped.
I wanted to say one thing that because I like what you just said, like the thing we learned about ourselves, right? There is this thing, and actually one of my other client, Tyrese, said this once to me too, like directly to my face, which I thought was funny. He says, like, Richard, you always say the truth, and it's not always helping. And I was like that for a moment, you go like, I I don't get it. Like, what are you talking about? And but he's right. Like, like there is something, the straightforwardness of a German mind in the fact over fiction in most cases is something that is not as common here. And I'm not saying that people lie all the time. It's not like that. But like the fact, this is like one of our guiding principles, to say the way things are like we believe them. We could be wrong, of course, right? But is something that is certainly being handled differently in this culture.
I just got a book. It's I can't remember the title. It's like The Culture Something or Another, about written by some person who like advises business people who travel abroad about cultural differences. And she said that I think the Germans, the Dutch, and the Israeli are just brutally direct with their criticism of each other. And her being, I think, American, she was just taken aback by it and was totally stunned that the people who were being criticized actually appreciated it. You know what I mean? So somebody's like saying, this was a shit job you did. Well, how could you possibly do this? Which she would never do. She would phrase it, especially you're in California, which, for you Germans watching, it's probably the most indirect part of the United States, I would say. At least that's my experience. The East Coast is very European in its unsubtlety. The middle is more friendly. They're just, and the West Coast is always friendly. Doesn't mean that they agree with something. It's something to get used to. But it's an interesting book, just to kind of see yourself in it. I don't know, I personally own that at this point, and sometimes have to convey this directness and, the fact that it's normal for within this culture to people with, like, let's say when I work with British musicians with a German artist and I'm the producer, and I take the artist to task and the British go, you can't say that type of thing. Whereas the artist really kind of craves that type of interaction. So yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, especially because the established artists usually don't get good criticism, right? Everybody likes everything they do.
Well, there's that. I mean, and certainly there is the culture of yes man, etc. And certainly there was such a thing in the Prince camp too, which is fine. I mean, that's the statue of things, so to speak. I think for us, especially as engineers, it's a little bit complicated because we are very much hired as a service person to begin with, and it takes a long time for the client to go like, hey, the guy, apart from hopefully being good at his job as capturing sound, for the guy to have input or being a sounding board is very much a deserved kind of rank. Like we're not supposed to offer input unless directly asked, and it will take some time until you go, hey, Richard, what do you think about this? And actually, for that matter, Prince only asked me like twice in the entire time what I actually personally think about this thing, which is fine. I mean, that's fine. But it is in direct conflict with our job description until we're like elevated to trusted friend, advisor, part of the gang kind of person, but not from the beginning. And so it's different than hiring somebody, hey, hiring a financial advisor. I'm actually here to asking you question, please advise me. It's a very different job description.
Mm-hmm. Another Prince engineer, Susan Rogers, described him as hyper-creative. She said Prince never showed up, what could I do today? He was always full of ideas, she said. That must be inspiring, right?
Yes, and I have to say that my only regret about my whole Prince time is that I didn't quit at the point where I didn't think it was inspiring anymore. But I hung up, on to the gig for a couple more months. And if you don't think that whirlwind, and it's not always a nice whirlwind that Prince was, is worth, putting all your time in for, then you're in the wrong spot. And you're neither, like Richard just said, you're not doing your job because you're not serving the vision that you encounter. So yes, it was inspiring. It was very inspiring. I did a couple of moments that will never leave me, where I'm just like, specific nights, specific insights, aha things, and just turnarounds and conversations and stuff that were just so out there. And I don't know enough about your CV, Richard, but like for me, the Prince thing was like one of the first gigs I had. I was like 2 years out of recording school 3 years out of recording school when I started becoming his main guy. So he was my first rock star, for lack of a better word. And I thought, well, that's how all rock stars are, because I didn't know any better. And I've worked with many a rock star since, and I can tell you there's nobody like that. So yeah, retrospectively, it's even more inspiring, because he really showed me the ropes. He was my boot camp, and it wasn't easy at all. It wasn't nice always, but it was just indispensable to what came afterwards, and it certainly made me totally fearless. I think I can walk into the room with any size artist at this point and have a pretty good handle on how I can serve, whether I can serve. So I'm, at the point where I can say, well, you know what? Thanks for asking me, but I'll recommend somebody to you who can do this much better than me, which is an amazing power. It took a while, clearly, financially as well and stuff. But that's something I learned from Prince. It's just I know what I have to do to be able to be efficient and to be good for you. I know I've worked with somebody who can do it better than you and just had and still have that type of attitude type thing. So I can navigate situations so much better just because of the Prince experience and that just endless tornado of good sounding things that came out of him. It wasn't always special, I should say. I mean, that's really interesting. He had no choice but to make music. A lot of it was, as songs, I would say, uninspired. But they were great uninspired songs. And that was one of his many talents, was to choose from this endless field of songs, pick the 12 that would go well together and make him an album. He was really good at that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I mean, there's a couple of things about that actually. Like, one would be, you're totally right. Like, basically, you have to get to the amazing, great stuff by doing a bunch of stuff that is maybe it's not great, but it's greatly done. And obviously, I know what I recorded, that hasn't seen the light of day, so to speak, and I hope for some of it to be released at one point, and some of it I'm like, well, this was not released because it was not finished or was just not all that. But you have to go through the motions, right? So that's the one thing. That's just the artistic way. And the great thing for him is like he did this at a level that we can just weep at. Like our crap ideas are unfortunately just crap ideas. His crap ideas were still full-blown, fully arranged songs that probably would be awesome for anybody else, right? But he would, at one point come down, well, this song we're not just take it out of the CD order. And basically no other discussion, not like should I not, or like, I don't know. He just like, there was a lot of decisions made right then and there. This one is out, the end. No discussion, no questions, no whatever. And never to be heard of again. For now, So that was one thing. The other thing, I do like the thing where you said when you had to leave or when you did leave or whatever. I felt a similar way. I was like, the job was so all-encompassing. And this is also something that we do as a recording engineer, not just for Prince. Just like, we are a little bit at the mercy of the artist. Like, how long are we going tonight? Don't know. How long is this project going to take? Don't know. That's different from whatever directors or producers that basically say, hey, I have this other thing to do. We don't have that option ever. Or at least I feel that basically that's not part of the job description. So in my case, it was like we had these 2 albums in the can, and they were about to be released. And then when there were 2 TV performances, which I stuck around for, Ellen and Jay Leno. And then I felt like, hey, hold on one moment here. This is a gig that, of course, I want to have. I mean, it's the ride of a lifetime. But I am at this very, very interesting moment in time, which is like we're actually releasing an album. I don't have to work 5 years and then get an album shelved or whatever. Here it is. So basically, I decided at that time, going like, hey, let me take the honor and the magic and the credit and find myself some other work and basically say, hey, now that I have professionally finished my involvement in these 2 albums, I'm gonna not be available the way I was, just like, let's do whatever, And I think in hindsight, even though that shortened my time with him, I think it was the right decision. Because there was a price to the ride, and the price was getting odd. And yes, I should you would go. I've been there only for 1 year, which is in regular project time. That's actually not that long, but in Prince time, that's a long time. A long time to be involved in that work. I'm actually giving full deference and full. I'm not worthy to you, Hans Martin, because like hanging for like 5-6 years. I don't know exactly how long. That sounds like a mountain to climb in an inspiring way. But I also been there, and you've been there, and we know there were the days when it was like, what just happened? And so I am, in hindsight, I'm happy the way it went down in that way. Yeah,
I do too. I don't feel like the end was something that either one needed to be ashamed of. I don't need to necessarily spread the details of it, but yeah, that's really it. I mean, I was there for 4 years, and my thing was, I remember I started in mid-96, and like in 98, there was just a period where I just got it up the ass every fucking day, and he was just on me like a freaking leech. And we were doing the Chaka Khan album at the time, and I was like, why am I doing this to myself? And it was, more or less what you said. I said, I'm going to finish the Chaka Khan album because this may take another 2 months or whatever it is. And when it's over, I have my name for the rest of my life on a Chaka Khan record. And those 2 months are just war stories. They'll go away. I'm a big guy. I can do it. And then we actually had a pretty head-on collision at some point where I stood my ground, which was really impressive because afterwards the respect level went up tenfold. And when I said I don't have time on those 2 days, which I, very rarely said, there was no discussion. He just accepted and that type of stuff. And that's what happened. So like for me, there was a show for the turn of the millennium, the rave unto the year 2000 it was called. And that went perfect. That was like everything I ever dreamt of. He didn't at all check sounds or whatever. He just let me do my thing. He rehearsed. He checked out, the camera people and whatever. And then we mixed it, and it was a beautiful thing. And I knew it wasn't going to get any better. And so my time was up about 6-7 months after that, and I felt like I overstayed my welcome because I knew at that point it wasn't going to get any better. Yeah. It was, it is what it is. I'm wondering, because you were just talking about the songs too, the ones that he just took off the sequence, which happened all the time in my day as well. Did you ever fight for one? Was there ever a song where you said, no, you can't do that because this is perfect and this is great and this is wonderful? And
I did not. There is a song I'm thinking of, and I don't want to leak stuff on the internet, but there is a song that's unreleased on the that I would love for it to see the light of day. That's all. I'm never gonna. Nobody can ask me what was that song or whatever. Don't worry about it, people. There's 1,000 songs in the vault, so what do you care? But there is a song I would love to see. But no, and I love what you just said. See, this is why I'm saying, like, I don't think the Prince engineers talk enough. The experience seems to be very similar in that way, and I actually, because I was, so to answer your question, I was about 8 years into my career when I got this gig. So I knew some stuff and I didn't know other stuff. And I also knew stuff wrongly, like as one does, as you learn. But I had a set of like acquired skills and opinions about the music and business and whatever that served and hindered me, as they always will, as they do today, So the interesting part was, and this goes back with what I said about the service part of being an engineer, right? Like, I mean, at the beginning, I mean, when I got the gig and when Timo and I talked about how I got the gig and all that stuff, of course I was like, my first impression was, I'm going to last 4 days, not because I'm not a good engineer, but because I know stuff about Prince, like this is not going to work out. I mean, sorry, this is very likely going to be very hard. So the end. And then it lasted for about a year. And in the middle of that, we had those days that Hans just talked about. They were also the most amazing memories I've ever made, musically speaking, on other days. So please, I say this to people all the time. You will always remember the bad things a little better than the really great things. The moment where he just walks out of the studio and says, "That was great, thank you," and you feel like $1 million, right? And the next day you get toward a new one, which is fine. This is, in general, that's my job description. But basically, we are in a world where we're hanging on for dear life for arguably the greatest artist ever. Like there's very few on his level. So you say yes, and you keep going for a lot of things, and so. What Hans is talking about, the like standing up to somebody, standing up to your client, be it a small client, is one thing already that's pretty hard because it's against your job description. Standing up to him was the hardest thing. And I want to say to myself that I probably should have done it earlier. And I learned that lesson much later with a different artist, where I literally slapped my hands on the table and was like, "No, we're not doing that." For 1,000 reasons. And like Hans, what happened is that person became a better friend, a better client, a more respectful person around me. I only won. And this is maybe actually one of the things that maybe the Germans don't understand too. Like, you can actually push back, you can say yes, you can get into a fight and be a better person for it. It's a surprising thing. You think you can do that maybe with your family, but not in a professional setting so much, So I came out of that. I wish I had that knowledge before. I wish I had one day going to Prince, "I get you, I'll do whatever you want, but I will not be treated this way." I wish I had that power, but I didn't, So, yeah, it's a creative... It's a creative point to say, like, okay, we're all making this record together. I'm here because I'm very good at this. I'm here because you decided I'm very good at this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So, So now can we please make this record the best we can, the best we want to? I will serve you, but I will not bend over all day long, That was an interesting dynamic, I would say.
He once told me, one of his little one-liners, "Hans, I'm the best in my business. Are you?" So he would pull these little one things, I mean, the thank yous clearly must have gotten a bit better in your day. But that's just one of the things, what happened with me, you were talking about us not communicating enough, us engineers. It's like, that was one of the weirdly positive things after he passed, is that all these people got together and that worked with him, for him, around him, close to him, whatever, throughout his career, and got their story back, because he was so jealous with his own storyline. And so we all got together. For example, I heard about you for the first time because I talked to Dave Hampton, and we talked about just the progression of Prince's recording thing. Because I don't know if you're aware of this, but like, I'm the guy who both introduced. So when I started working with him, like the whole 90s thing was digital 48-track tape, that whole Studer stuff. And I'm the guy who both introduced Pro Tools to him, because I had a rig at my house. Even, I think in 96, I got my first rig. And as you know, you couldn't really introduce him to something and if it didn't improve the workflow in a faster way, you had one chance and one chance only for this to be just rejected. So I had good timing on that. So I got Pro Tools in, just as it was then in the late 90s, early 2000s, where it wasn't like a recording medium. It was you pop something over from another medium, you edit it, you pop it back to the medium where you recorded. And the other thing I reintroduced was analog tape. Because I figured, why don't we, it sounds better, you like it better, you understand it better. I didn't say this, by the way, I just did it. Because he never understood the concept of digital levels. I don't know how it was in your day, but like in my day, he would just totally, overload it. And it's one of the reasons some of that 90s stuff sounds so harsh, because he didn't understand, like, unlike tape, analog tape, you couldn't just overload it and it would bounce back at you. So I figured, let's get the analog back, and then you just do your thing, and then I transfer it to digital, and you can do your overdubs or whatever it is you want to do, and you can fly stuff around. And that was pretty cool. So Dave Hampton, for those of you watching, he's an extraordinary technician who builds studios and fixes stuff. We talked about just kind of how things, how Paisley worked. And he told me like how he changed the studio and how like Prince in the end went away from the analog tape-based thing and then mentioned your name as like one of the first young engineers that were actually raised in the box world, for lack of a better word. You really, really used Pro Tools not just as a tape machine with editing capabilities, but something of its own, and how that changed Prince's perspective. And also, by the way, I wonder if that's true. He told me, which I think philosophically is a really interesting idea. He said that Prince had a real problem with the fact that in Pro Tools, there's no yesterday. Because, as we all know, if I now work on a Pro Tools session, I can import or go back to whatever I did 2 years ago on the same song, just open it and it'll be right there and I'll be back to that. So Dave said that he made, I don't know if he talked about you specifically, but that he made his engineers consolidate every track at the end of every day and then toss what happened the day before. Is that true?
Oh,
did that happen in your time?
No, that didn't happen in my time. Actually, one of the reasons why I think I kept the gig, I mean, getting it is one other thing, but like kept the gig for until I decided to not keep the gig, was that I was raised exactly at that intersection. I actually started with analog tape, and at the time it would be also DA88s and whatever. So like the end of the 90s. I graduated from school in 99. So I was one of those people who like first went into Pro Tools. And I actually quit my assistant job in New York because every engineer coming in was a Pro Tools guy. And I was like, why am I assisting a Pro Tools guy? I'm here to learn engineering. I was pretty cocky at the time. But then I became that person too. And I knew both ways. So he's like, well, can we sync these machines together and all that stuff? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. Because this is what we always would do, which like somebody later might not know. I'm not saying they didn't, sorry. But there was an interesting intersection. So then, as far as the consolidation goes, no. It was actually very surprising to me. Like, when I came in, I was like, wait a second. Are we the first people to use Pro Tools? Because he, like, said things along the line. I'm like, you don't know this. This has never happened to you? Like, this and that and the other. I can't think of a very specific thing right now. But, like, it was very clear to me that he had not used it for himself, or like, obviously we bounced everything to 2-inch for him to do vocals and whatever, and also guitars. But otherwise he let me run the show basically, and everything was mixed in the box on one album. Not on both albums basically, but on one album I was doing it all myself, which I didn't get the mixing credit for, which was really weird. I was like, how do you, okay. Fine. Here you give me a Pro Tools engineer credit for the MPL sound album when I basically mixed the whole thing. You didn't even touch the damn thing. Sorry. Can't say damn with Prince around. So anyway, not anymore. But Doesn't matter, but there was not that. But maybe he learned from that experience too. Is maybe he didn't like that. And I personally, I am a super defender of that whole thing. If you had a chance, especially if you're a producer and you're sending stuff off to a mixer, take 5 minutes, take all the faders down, and then spend 5 minutes to build a new mix. You still have the other one, just save as new, right? And just see if it's musically all there, and also actually even more so, is it maybe too much? Like, is all the stuff that's in there just there because it happens to be in there for the last 3 months? Do you need it? Does it take 10 minutes for you to decide that before you mix it or have it mixed? People don't do that anymore because levels are saved into the DAW. But as Hans knows, it used to be you have to build the rough mix every single time. That's why a fader was there in the first place. And this is maybe also the reason why so many mixing engineers, including myself now, don't have a fader anymore, because why? The blend is already there, so to speak. Anyway, that's a different discussion. But maybe that came from there. Like, maybe he wanted to go like, well, we want this, and then we want to readdress it tomorrow. But we never had the discussion. And that consolidation thing, I don't know. No, it hasn't happened to me. I think there was like an intersection where he didn't quite understand what was going on. And +1 on digital levels, I was like, sir, I know what you're doing. I know you want to see the red line out, the 3 red lines on the studio. I get you. This does not work in Pro Tools. Well, it does, but it is a different thing. And there are things in there that I had to let go because he would just override me. It's like, no, but I want it this way. I'm like, okay. And then the next day, the answer would be something like, but why does it sound this way? I'm like, because never mind. Like it's there. There was a lot of that, and I'm not saying that's in a bad way. It's just in a kind of like, it's an interesting intersection of art and technology where one person, not me, is powerful and also gets to have his way, because he's the client. And chooses to ignore advice or take it whenever he wishes. That's a minefield. It's a minefield that, as a good engineer, you actually learn how to navigate that. I'm not saying this is all bad, but it is something that doesn't happen in many professions. That basically, the professional is being told, "But I don't care. Just do it differently." Every single time, and also coming from a point where, like, well, obviously he made records for longer than me. He's not wrong, right? He's not fully wrong, but there are outcomes that we can predict. Some, like you said, like something might sound harsh or not so great, and sometimes you surprise yourself. So actually, in hindsight, I think he was right about the fact that you can clip digital harder than you think before it actually goes to crap. Like, yeah, technically it's not right, but like, look at us. We have clipping plugins to like basically emulate converters, which is bizarre, but it is true. And we have decided that some clipping sounds better than limiting because it's of the slew rate and the crest factor being handled differently, etc. So he was not wrong. But running a whole project on that level, is a totally different way, and it makes you kind of lose your mind a little bit as a person. You see, like, well, what do I know? What do I not know? What are these assumptions that I'm bringing? And he actually said at one point, and this was the funniest thing to me. Actually, it was not very funny the day it happened, but it said, like, I was doing a backup, right? And he said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just backing up this project to another hard drive." And he's like, "Oh, so you're making an illegitimate copy?" I'm like, "Excuse me?" "Oh, you're making a copy that I didn't ask you for and that shouldn't exist." And I'm like, "Okay, I cannot," like, in my mind, like, I cannot be the first person making a backup. Actually, I see other backups, I'm like, "Okay, so I understand. What would you have me do?" He's like, "Do not back up anymore." I'm like, "Okay." So basically, I was sitting there for at least 3 months with one hard drive of the latest 2 Prince albums, not backed up, and like this tiny think in my head, like, I hope this thing crashes, just for you to like understand that we're trying to help you do your best. Nobody's trying to take anything away or not be on your team, you know. So anyway, that's a funny one.
You know, I think one of the weird things of Prince was that I don't know, you've worked with many more artists on that fame level, at least, where he was, than I have. But in my experience, I think Prince is the guy I worked with that was most in control of his destiny. There was virtually nothing in his orbit that he didn't personally approve in my day. In my day, he even signed every check, which made things a bit hard. So every check. I'm probably the only engineer of the later people that has an autograph because I didn't cash a check for $20 he wrote once or something. So I do have an autograph of Prince.
Quick insert on that. That is hilarious that you say that, because literally like 2 weeks ago I was like, man, I think I have a Prince check somewhere.
There you go.
I should just frame it for all. I should just have it.
You should put that in your car in case you have to leave. You definitely have to do that.
But then the weirdest part happened. Like I found the actual deposit slip.
Yeah.
But then you don't have the check anymore. So the
Yes.
bank had it. It was from 2008, and it was, you know, a check. And I remember him giving it to me. And I don't have it anymore. Anyway, doesn't matter. That's funny.
There you go. So he was in total control of his destiny. And, you know, at some point, I think if you're that type in control, you have to realize if you're in control all the time and shit doesn't work out, it may be your fault. And he was really, really, really bad at that. And so I really lost, I think, the patience I needed to have. You know, it would always go in circle for every album. It was like, great, great, great. Whatever we do is fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. And then it'd be like, why don't we sound like the latest named popular pop artist here album? It's the fault of the studio. It's blah, blah, blah. It's not the workflow. It's not the way we do things, and we don't program, blah, 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 all that stuff. It was always the fault of something that was not up to his standards. And that's funny for a while, and that's, you know, you try to change a little thing here and there, and then maybe something big is changing. And you get to the point, or I got to the point where I was like, you know what, fuck this shit. He just doesn't get it. Whereas he did get it because, you know, somebody came in, and this wasn't Dave Hampton, but like a previous guy, Bruce Millett is his name, and he did a refurbish like of the speakers and stuff in Studio A at Paisley, and that inspired Prince. That's the point. He didn't fix something that was needed fixing necessarily, but he breathed new life into the creativity of Prince. And it didn't matter at all whether it was vain or not. It just was what it was, and he had the right to be vain in that way, and I just didn't get it anymore. So there. But, you know, I want to finish real quick my thought from earlier. It's like, so I met Dave and a bunch of other people because we had gatherings after he died. So that for those of you out there, there's like a Facebook group, has been for a long time, which is a Prince alumni group, where everybody was really in there, from the receptionist from 19 whenever to people of the revolution. So it's a really impressive group. And then it turned into a non-profit charity type thing after he passed. And in the beginning, we met up once in Minneapolis. It was great. It was totally awesome. That's where I met Susan Rogers. That's where I met Dave Hampton, and just got some continuity, which is really cool, I think. I mean, you know, it was so intense that you thought your Prince experience was totally insular, and you're, you know, something that you would kind of shat on sometimes. You figure like, okay, why am I getting all the shit and all the others had the fun? And the other way around. It's like, you know, where's the greatness? Where's that coming on? And why did I, you know, this is great. And then you learn all these things, how they grew into stuff. And especially Susan Rogers, she's just, you know, I mean, she was just our queen, really, in the sense that she was amazing, I think, not having been there. She was amazing for Prince as a support, as a studio support. And she was there when he was at his most creative, I think, or his most original, I should say, and his most successful as well. So she actually built Paisley. So all of us who came afterwards were always fairly young engineers. You know, very rarely did he hire somebody, you know, who was at the level where you and I are now. He would like always get newer people. So you'd go in there and you'd be confronted with all these recording techniques and setups and pieces of gear that, were, even when I showed up, were just antiquated. And I'd seen the pieces of gear before, but not used in the way he used them. And then you'd find out, okay, this came out of this situation in 1988 where they needed to do something quick and somebody had a good idea and they checked and all of a sudden it became a workflow. So meeting all that people, especially Susan, who really put all that stuff in and started the vault, is, that was really, really inspiring. And I hope there'll be more. I tried to get a meeting together when I'm in LA, but not much was happening there. So do you see people? There's quite a few of us in LA. Do you ever see people?
I wish. I met many people. Dave Hampton at the time, he was also a trusted advisor. I was like, wait a second, there is no such thing, because I was building multiple, like a mobile Pro Tools rig or whatever, and he's like, oh, we already did that. I'm like, well, that would be great to know. Where is it? Anyway, but then I did meet Susan Rogers at Berkeley because I went back there. So I see them. I see them here and there. I suppose when I say they don't talk. Say that in an odd way. For me to have gotten the gig, and maybe you and maybe the person after me, somebody just lost their gig, right? So either by walked away or got fired. So basically, what I learned is that I talked to some of the people coming after me. I was like, well, you could have just called me and asked me how this or that, so we don't have the full exploration of the whole human nature every single time. But then again, to their defense, I also didn't call this guy before because I'm like, that would be also a little awkward, So that's the direct communication between changing of the guards didn't really happen, and I'm sure there were questions I could have answered beforehand. I do, on the other hand, believe that that knowledge wouldn't have helped in a way. In a way, it seems like from the stories I hear, and US is actually supporting that climb. It's like that same kind of thing happened a bunch. I did experience why doesn't it sound like that? Well, how about we don't record at 6 dB clipping every single instrument? I don't know. How about that? That's why it sounds like that. I don't know. But that whole I feel in hindsight whatever knowledge he would have had to go oh, I'm gonna be the one who's gonna be his best engineer, best match, whatever. That's futile. The man changed like an enigma, but he did have that underlying I want things my way, and that's okay. That's an okay request as a client. That's actually okay. It's just a way to get there. I felt at one point I was like, this is not learnable. It just changes every day in a way that is unforeseeable. And that's one of the reasons why I'm like, I need to button up the story because I don't want to be the person being here for 6-7 years and then still going well, didn't we do that 5 years ago? Didn't we not resolve that 5 years ago? Are we because one of the things that we do, especially as recording engineers, is we get into a room, we all know that we don't know each other, and we make records different ways, and this has nothing to do with Prince, but everybody. But you kind of learn each other, and you get a little bit less friction. You become best friends after 3-4 weeks, hopefully, and you we are in this together. In a place like his, it kept changing every single day in the way he was actually working with people that were there for very much longer, who, if I were right, would have to have smooth sailing. It didn't happen that way. That's where I realized, oh, this is the state of flux. This is the moment of creativity that happens for him every day. And you either choose to be part of that or you don't. And that's kind of how we went through that.
Yeah, I had it a bit easier because, I was the first of the warrior types like you were. Before me, so I started when it was still a functioning rental studio. I started in the beginning of 95, and I was supposed to replace one of his engineers, and that came differently, which at the time I was, as you can imagine, very unhappy about. But it turned out to be a really good thing, because I had a year of getting the feel of the place and really getting at least impressions from all the others that worked with him about, what made it so whirlwindy. And we actually had something which was really fun. We actually had print school. That was really funny. So his engineer at the time, Ray Hanfeld, very, very good engineer. He came in, I think, around Graffiti Bridge, and he became his main guy, certainly for gold and all that stuff. And he left in 96, did he? I don't remember. Anyway, so he played Prince, and another engineer played Maite, his partner at the time. So we had to set up this. We new guys had to set up the studio, and then they behave like Prince would behave. And I remember that to this day, these are friends of mine, or people that I, at least was, at ease with. And I was fucking sweating and on edge, because they did it really well. They did that whole why do I not hear anything? Oh, it always sounds like that. That type of stuff. It was just so gah. And that was super helpful when it came to, I remember the first day I actually worked for him. I think, you got a couple of one-liners that they used in that print school. And it was just one day. So you remember how impressive it's obvious how impressive that was for me. But the first day I actually worked for Prince, like a year later, he used one of those lines. One of them was, it was like, so I can tell you, so for you DAW people out there back in the day, punching in, going into record and going back out with tape was quite the heady stuff. And usually it was one of the more intense, responsibilities of an engineer, because if you go into record too early, you wipe what's there already, and you shouldn't have. And if you go out too late, you wipe what's afterwards. There's no undo. So he would punch himself as he was playing guitar. And so I said, do you want some help with that? And he looked at me and went, nope, been doing it for 20 years. And that was one of those one-liners that they had. And I was just like, I've been well prepared. So there was a bit of school with that. And there were just great people, that came from a time that was less removed from the mainstream, and he was still kind of getting into it. So like the wonderful man, Sal Greco, who actually built Paisley and later went down to Nashville and built Ocean Way there, stuff like that. He's just an amazing guy. He's a guy who actually started Electric Lady in New York when Eddie Kramer was still running it. So Eddie Kramer is the engineer of Jimi Hendrix, actually, who built Electric Lady. And Sal was like an intern, and they had like this joke where they would give the intern something to fix that wasn't fixable, just to kind of fuck with his head. And he fixed it. And that's how he became the super tech that he was. And he had a really, really good way. He had a really good take on Prince and could explain him well. For example, so when I first started as assistant, I was like, and he was, he wasn't Prince. He was like that. And so I asked, so what do I do if he talks to me? And Sal went, look, this is what's going to happen. He's going to come in here and into the tech shop to me, Sal, and he's going to say, Sal, who's that guy? And then I'll say, that's Hans. Does he work for me? Yes, he does. He's from Germany. Okay. And then one day, I'll just have you in a session, do this and that and the other thing. That's exactly what happened. So, there was some predictability from people who were there a long time, and that was super helpful for me when all of a sudden, new thing, for you the same thing, clearly, I was on my own. I was Paisley Park Studios for 4 years. And I don't have any tech talent or abilities, I should say. Talent, probably not either. So I had to organize people coming in and fixing stuff. I had to order the tapes. I had to do everything. There was nobody else. I was literally doing that for 4 years. And I don't think I would have not survived the first week had it not been for that advice from all these veterans that And also, oddly enough, by experiencing some of the bitterness that some of them had, which is not unlike what I had at the end, of like, he doesn't deserve me type stuff. He can't even play guitar. I went to that point. Sometimes I heard that type of stuff where it's like, he's not as great as they say, and that, whatever, It was just people were there too long.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
that
it
one
was.
is not true. He is actually as great as they say.
Yeah, totally. I totally.
Yeah, as we do recall war stories, we shall not forget that this is the person he decided to be. Like, he's full of that talent. That doesn't mean you write the best song every single day, but he has the potential to do it every single day. I fully believe that. Hands down, I don't even want to put an asterisk next to it or a but or anything. He was that guy in my time. He did not fix anything. Like, basically, like I'm gonna play a guitar track. So he did play a guitar track and then put the guitar down. Here's a keyboard part. Like, he would not mess up a single time in a year. He would only change a part in my experience. Like, I don't like that. Let me do it differently. But not like, oh, nah, crap, I just clammed or whatever. He didn't do that. Sure.
No.
There could have been some
Never.
of that while he was doing it himself, because I didn't witness
And
that.
he didn't practice in the basement either. He didn't.
He
He just came in and did it.
He
The
just
idea
came
and the
in.
execution were simultaneous. I mean, it was just so amazing. I'm totally with you.
And that answers Timo's question, like the whole thing, like, is he always just showing up with creativity or like whatever? It was literally, he would walk in and you just knew it's about to go down. Like, there was not like, hey, I'm working on the song or I need like an hour to finish writing these lyrics or anything. He didn't do that in my time. He just, the song was already in his mind. He was ready to lay it down. There would be some time when he would say, hey, go to the engineer's lounge and just chill because he's going to do his own vocals, whatever. And I don't know what happens in that part. But overall, the creation and the idea was there from the whole beginning. And there was no question about it either. There was never the idea, the conversation, not even with people in his circle that I've overheard. Is this a good song? What do you think about this? Should I go ahead? None of that. It was just, let's do the song, and then something would happen with the song. Either it would go out there or not, right? But that is a very singular experience. Every single artist I've ever worked with, be of any stature and small and big, they always question themselves, and that's part of their process. I'm not saying that's a fault, right? But that is 100% what he didn't portray. He portrayed ultimate confidence in his work. If he was right about that, it's a different story, right? But like, there was never a question in his mind that he showed to people. I mean, maybe there were questions in his mind, but he didn't portray that.
There were like 2 or 3 songs that I can think of that were labored over. Like, I would labor over any song. I totally agree with you. I think the one thing that took me a while to understand is that his ideas weren't preconceived. They virtually flowed out perfectly formed as he was having them. So that's what I mean too. I totally agree with you, Richard. It's like Shakespeare having just the power of the word and being always able to having like doing the perfect couplets or putting it out, but sometimes not having an idea for a cool idea for a play, but the way it would sound would just be flawless every last time. I totally agree with you. I mean, that's one of the things, like I said, in the beginning, I thought, well, it's my first rock set. It's just, when you're at that level, that's clearly how you need to be. And then, I've worked with artists that have to remember where A is. And, kind of are starting to look for chords and stuff. That never happened with Prince, ever. He never fumbled or thought about how does that work again or whatever. Sometimes I would have wished he would have fumbled more, to be perfectly honest, to kind of look for sounds and look for the happy accidents. I mean, I tell people who have not experienced this, which clearly is most people, just look at the Sign of the Times Deluxe thing that came out, 2 years ago. There is the double album, which has been released in the 80s. And then there's 65 fully finished songs in that box, not remakes or whatever. alternative, different songs of all types. There's like genre songs, like R&B, gospel-y type things. There's really weird, funky, indie, what they now call alternative or experimental R&B, whatever it's called, stuff. And the coolness was to choose the right ones and put them together in a sequence and make them say something as a whole. That is really something I learned there. And that's something, oddly enough, I think one of the procedures in music making that are kind of getting lost because everybody can always listen to the song they want best. They don't listen to albums. But that part is just totally amazing. And he didn't like singles. I don't know how you feel about that. But like, I remember him saying back in the days, like, when you write a book, it's not like you rip out one page and then send it around for people to read. So he just liked making albums.
Yeah, he said that. I just saw a video, saw an interview with, I think Tavis Smiley, maybe. I don't know, where he said that about that. He didn't say that to me about the singles. I mean, we did singles in a way, but he also was at a time in 2008 where he was like, I know radio is not just gonna play my song up and down like Purple Rain or Let's Go Crazy. He was aware of that, but he did make videos for like 3 songs and so, and dropped them at a specific time, and then had genre charts and genre radio stations play that. Of course they would, but they knew they would not go up against Katy Perry or whoever was big at the time, and that was actually refreshing. Going like, maybe I want to say it like this: there are a lot of artists in the world that basically they have the potential to have a single and a hit now, and they go into the studio now going like, I want to make this thing that will fit into this world and be a hit, and they hopefully do, and I wish they will, right? But they should also realize that just because you're that person, because you're that artist with that capability, doesn't mean it will shake out this time, because people care differently these days. It's just, it might be the best song ever and people will not care. And I think he was in a good space where he's like, well, I know I'm not Purple Rain level today. He would never say this, by the way, of course not, right? But he knew where he was, and basically what he did, he's like, how can we do this smarter? And he wouldn't say that, because he would just declare, this is how we do it smarter, and makes this deal. At that time, he took this triple album and made a deal with Target and says, you can only sell it at Target. Like, the hard copy was only available at Target, and well, we put it on iTunes too at the time. But that was the only way to get it, and it still went to number 2 on Billboard charts, which was just a huge hit. Keith Urban outsold us by like 3,000 copies. But he was like, basically, Target bought the album from him so that he didn't have to worry anymore if it's a hit or not. It's super smart, forward-thinking ways to play back against the music industry, and just with a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, I would say, going like, I know we're not gonna be Michael Jackson big in 2008, but we're gonna do something that's awesome and that I remember.
See, you didn't have that peace of mind in my day. I think that's really the one thing that is unfortunate, because I think I was like at the cusp between this R&B glitter star of Diamonds and Pearls type level, which is different than the Prince I like, the kind of cocky thing that's on Parade and stuff. That's kind of more the stuff I liked as a fan. And then, with like Rainbow Children, I feel like he kind of shed that, I need to be beating Justin Timberlake at his game and just go like, well, I do what I do and you can come along or not. That's kind of, that's how I do stuff. And I wish he would have had that more in my time.
I think it's a very healthy way to look at it for
Totally.
a growing artist, growing in time. He's not 25. I mean, I always when I think about this, he was like 25 when he did Purple Rain and 1999. Like, I mean, so the whole accomplishment of that, to base your whole career on that, going like, I'm gonna be always that great, is futile at best. But that not saying that he doesn't have the capability to crank out an amazing song any given day, which he did. So yeah, no, I did. I did like that. I did like being in that place because it is less from fear. The fear comes from, hey, I have to put out a single that plays with Justin Timberlake or that plays, like next to, so to speak, right? That works in the mainstream. Like a good pop artist like actually Madonna or Britney Spears would do. They would change their sound to fit into the release year, which is cool. This is totally fine way to doing things. But that was not him. He's like, like you said, like, I'm just going to do the thing. I have people who will gobble this up, and they will probably not have a radio single that people will dance to at all times, so to speak.
By the way, and he did that thing with one store before, which was Best Buy in the Crystal Ball.
Oh, he
at least
did?
at
Okay.
first. And that was one of the biggest mistakes of my life, where he called me and the head of his then mail service, 1-800 New Funk it was called.
No,
into his
I have
office.
the album.
Yeah, there you
that
go.
album.
But it was like, you could call 1-800 New Funk and you could buy stuff and you could get CDs and what you would do on Bandcamp now, more or less. We would make little extra things that you could only get there. You can't get to this day, like live shows, just cassette stuff. And anyway, he called us into his office. Jackie's her name, and he asked me, so here's what I want to do. I'm going to make this thing and then I'm going to sell it to Best Buy and put it out. And do you want to help me with the crystal ball? And I was like, well, I help him anyways. I mean, I'm the guy in the studio who does that thing. And I said, yes. So I literally was put in a suit and I went to fucking Best Buy and wrote the contract with him and made the whatever things. And then got in a bit of trouble with his regular attorney, whose name we must not mention, who got very helpful once Prince kind of told him, look, Hans isn't overstepping his boundaries. He's doing what I told him to do. And then I got the check, which I will not say the amount, but I got the check from Best Buy, which was agreed upon, and put him on his on his plate, more or less, and was very proud about it.
That is amazing. That's a great story. That's exactly how it would happen for in his camp too. Like somebody who is technically, officially not qualified to do a specific thing, all of a sudden, because of I trust this person for now, which is actually, it was a big compliment in a way. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but it was a compliment. It would all of a sudden get the gig. I mean, I know of chauffeurs that became day-to-day managers. I know of, me all of a sudden also, like you, became Paisley Park because... So I don't want to take that credit from anybody, but it was like I was in charge of like, well, does this studio work? Can we get the people, get the supplies, get the whatever? Because people probably don't know this, but at the time that I was there, his whole operation was like 4 people deep, maybe 5.
Same here. I don't want to get credit for being Paisley Park in terms of like I guided Prince's life. That's not what I mean. But I was any studio job there was me. That's what I meant. Same, yeah, like you said just now.
There was a guy, and I'm going to give him credit. His name is Rick Pelican, and he was the in-house taking care of the grounds, but had absolutely no idea how a studio works, for instance, right? But all of a sudden, like I'm like have to assess, like, does this SSL 8000 actually work? Do we need recapping, et cetera, do all these things? And I'm like you, I'm actually a musician first, so I have absolutely zero electrical / technical ability. If it's broken, it's broken. That's somebody else's gig, which is, by the way, a beautiful way to have come up in our times. Most studios had a tech. So you go like this 480 is not passing sound, and you sit in a lounge and wait until it gets fixed. You didn't have to have that kind of expertise, and it was a very different career path. Now that we have, well, studios like this, all of a sudden we have to do it all. We have to know everything. But at the time, basically, yeah, I was a lot of things were thrown at me that I had to do, and I was like, okay, well, I'll write with this until I can't, so to speak. I'll handle until I can't. And it was interesting. So like once you get that call that you just mentioned, like, hey, can you handle this for me? It meant respect. It was not easy. It was not like a promotion or something. It's more like he literally goes like, I think Hans will do right by me, as in he will do his best. It doesn't mean that he definitely means he's going to do the most amazing job. But he seemed to like that more than, hiring somebody that he doesn't know, but that happened to be more capable. And maybe that's how we got the gig in the first place. because if a person at his statue should have scoured credits and go, I like the sound of this, let's call this guy. I have all the money in the world. They will definitely come because I'm Prince. But that's not how he did things. He's like, he meets somebody, he sees somebody in a show, you sound good. You did a good thing. This record sounded cool. Now you have a gig. That's literally how this happened all the time.
And then you get thrown in the deep end.
Oh,
and
yeah.
if you can swim, you get to hang out for a while. Yeah, exactly. I think for me, the hardest time was first 5 months were just unbelievably intense because he wasn't sure that I knew what I was talking about. And then he'd have to gauge it onto people he trusted. And was under intense pressure, I have to admit. It was before Emancipation was released. It was just this huge new start after Warner Brothers and blah, 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 blah. But anyway, that was really tough. And after that, it was much easier, much easier. It was just intense hours and intense everything, intense. And I found out afterwards that the others, like the guys who were still there, like Guitar Tech and, like you said, people who took care of the grounds in his house and all that stuff, they had bets how long I'd last. They lost, all of them. So anyway, that was intense times. Good times, though. I wouldn't want to miss those because also he wasn't used to me yet. So after a day, kind of like you mentioned, of intense pressure, would be like an hour at night where he'd say, look, dude, I'm sorry. Not in these words, but he'd say, I'm sorry if I've been doing this, but this is what's going on and blah, blah, blah. Which I may say, I think I don't got a sorry ever again after that time. There were some between the line type things. But, Timo and I were both from Schwaben, Swabian, southern Germany, and there's a saying, it's like, nicht geschimpft ist genug gelobt. Not being cussed out is enough praise. So that's kind of what it was like.